The sound of her uncle's laughter cut through Katherine Everly like a dull knife as he counted the money in his weathered hands, not even bothering to glance her way as the stranger beside him appraised her like livestock at an auction. It was August 1878 in Lincoln, New Mexico Territory, and Katherine had just learned that family meant nothing when desperation and greed took hold of a man's heart. "She's strong enough," her Uncle Martin said, his tobacco-stained teeth showing through his grin. 20 years old, good for cooking and cleaning. Got no husband, no prospects. You're getting a fine deal, mister. Katherine stood in the dusty parlor of her uncle's ranch house, her hands clenched so tightly at her sides that her nails bit into her palms. She had come to live with her uncle and aunt 2 years ago after her parents died of fever, believing that blood meant something, that family would protect her. Instead, she had become an unpaid servant, worked from dawn until long after dusk, fed scraps, and now this ultimate betrayal. Martin Everly was selling her to a cattle rancher from Texas named Harold Grimm, a man with cold eyes and a cruel mouth who had already buried 2 wives under suspicious circumstances. "Let me see her teeth," Grimm said, stepping forward. Katherine jerked back, her green eyes blazing. "I am not a horse." Her uncle's hand flew out, catching her across the cheek with enough force to snap her head to the side. "You'll do as you're told, girl. I've fed and housed you for 2 years. You owe me." "My parents left you money for my care," Katherine said, her voice shaking but steady. "You spent it on whiskey and cards." Martin raised his hand again, but Grimm caught his wrist. Now, don't damage the merchandise. I'll take her as is. We have an agreement." The door to the ranch house suddenly swung open, and a tall figure filled the doorway, backlit by the harsh afternoon sun. "Martin Everly," Katherine's uncle turned, squinting. "Who's asking?" The man stepped inside, and Katherine's breath caught despite her terror. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and a lean, muscular build. His face was sun-bronzed and angular, with a strong jaw and striking blue eyes that seemed to miss nothing. He wore a dusty black hat, a dark vest over a cotton shirt, and worn denim pants tucked into scuffed leather boots. A gun belt sat low on his hips, the holster tied down in the manner of someone who knew how to use it. "Name's Quentin Fischer," the man said, his voice a low drawl that somehow commanded attention without being loud. "I'm here about the water rights dispute with the Henderson Ranch. Heard you might know something about it." "Don't know nothing about that," Martin said quickly, too quickly. "I'm in the middle of business here." Quentin's gaze swept the room, taking in Katherine's reddened cheek, her defensive posture, the money in Martin's hand, and Grimm's proprietary stance near her. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "What kind of business?" "Private business," Grimm growled. "Move along, Cowboy." Quentin did not move. Instead, he looked directly at Katherine for the first time, and she saw something in his eyes that she had not seen in any man's gaze in a very long time. Respect. "Miss, are you all right?" The simple question, asked with such genuine concern, nearly broke through Katherine's carefully maintained composure. "I have no say in the matter," she said quietly. "The hell is this?" Grimm demanded. "Who are you?" "Already said my name." Quentin's attention shifted to Martin. "What's happening here?" "He's selling me," Katherine said before her uncle could speak. "Like cattle. This man is paying him to take me to Texas." Quentin's expression did not change, but something dangerous flickered in those blue eyes. "That's so. It's legal," Martin said defensively. "She's my ward. I can arrange a marriage for her." "Marriage implies the lady has some say," Quentin observed. "Doesn't look like she's agreeable." "What she wants doesn't matter," Grimm said, stepping forward. "The deal is done. The money's been paid." "How much?" The question hung in the air. Grimm's eyes narrowed. "What? How much did you pay for her?" Quentin asked, his tone conversational but his body language anything but casual. I'm curious what a man's going for these days. $300, Martin said, and it's none of your concern. Quentin reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a leather wallet. He counted out bills with deliberate slowness. 400. I'll pay you 400 to tear up whatever paper you've got with Grimm here. Catherine's heart hammered against her ribs. What was happening? Why would you do that? Grimm demanded. Because I don't like men who buy women, Quentin said simply. And I especially don't like men who buy them against their will. He looked at Martin. 400. That's 100 more than he's paying. Good profit for you. Martin's eyes gleamed with greed, but he hesitated. Grimm might take offense. Grimm can take whatever he likes, Quentin said. His hand did not move toward his gun, but the implication was clear. Grimm's face darkened with rage. You're making a mistake, Fischer. Won't be my first. Quentin placed the money on the table. What do you say, Everly? You're a businessman, aren't you? Martin's fingers twitched toward the bills. Katherine could see the war in his expression between his agreement with Grimm and the lure of more money. Greed won. It always did with Martin. Fine. The girl's yours, but you take her now, and I don't want to see her face around here again. That won't be a problem, Quentin said. Grimm's hand moved toward his gun, but Quentin was faster. His revolver was out and leveled before Grimm's fingers even touched his holster. I wouldn't, Quentin said softly. Grimm froze, hatred burning in his eyes. This isn't over. Yeah, it is. Quentin kept his gun trained on Grimm while addressing Katherine. Miss, do you have belongings you need to collect? Katherine's mind reeled. Everything was happening so fast. I have a bag upstairs. Just some clothes. Go get it. Quickly. She did not need to be told twice. Katherine hurried up the narrow stairs to the tiny room under the eaves where she had slept for 2 years. Her possessions fit into a single carpet bag. 2 spare dresses, some undergarments, a shawl her mother had made, and a small Bible that had belonged to her father. She grabbed the bag and rushed back downstairs. Quentin was still holding his gun on Grimm, while Martin had already pocketed the money. Ready? Quentin asked. Yes. Then let's go. He backed toward the door, keeping both men in his sight. Grimm, if I see you following us, I won't be as polite as I've been today. Outside, the sun was blindingly bright after the dimness of the house. Quentin's horse, a large roan gelding, was tied to the hitching post. He holstered his gun and took Katherine's bag, securing it behind his saddle with practiced efficiency. Can you ride? He asked. Yes, but we'll get you a horse in town. For now, you'll have to ride with me. He swung up into the saddle and extended his hand down to her. Katherine hesitated, her mind finally catching up to events. I don't understand. Why did you do that? Quentin's expression softened slightly. Because it was the right thing to do. Now come on. Grimm's mean enough to try something stupid, and I'd rather not shoot a man today if I can avoid it. That made sense. Katherine grasped his hand, and he pulled her up behind him with easy strength. She had to wrap her arms around his waist to keep her seat, and she was acutely aware of the solid warmth of him, the smell of leather and sage and something else that was just him. Hold on, he said, and urged the horse into a steady trot down the dusty road toward town. Katherine looked back once at her uncle's ranch, the place that had been her prison for 2 years, and felt nothing but relief that she would never see it again. But that relief was tempered by uncertainty. She had escaped one trap, but what had she walked into? This man, Quentin Fischer, had just paid $400 for her. What did he expect in return? As if reading her thoughts, Quentin spoke over his shoulder. I know you've got questions. We'll talk when we get to town and somewhere safe, but I want you to understand something right now. I didn't buy you. I gave your uncle money to leave you alone, but you're not my property. You're not anyone's property. You understand?" Catherine's throat tightened with unexpected emotion. "Then what am I? Free," he said simply. "You're free." The word felt foreign, impossible. She had not been free since her parents died, and even before that, as a woman in this harsh territory, freedom had always been a relative thing. But the way he said it, with such conviction, made her want to believe it could be true. They rode in silence for a while. Lincoln spread out before them, a collection of adobe and wooden buildings along a dusty main street. It was a town still recovering from the violence of the Lincoln County War that had ended just months before. Bullet holes still scarred some of the buildings, reminders of the conflict between rival factions fighting for control of commerce and politics in the region. Quentin guided his horse to a modest hotel called the Ellis House. He dismounted and helped Katherine down, his hands respectful on her waist, releasing her the moment her feet touched the ground. "Wait here," he said, and went inside. Katherine stood beside the roan, stroking its neck with trembling fingers. Her mind was a whirlwind of emotions: fear, relief, confusion, and something else she could not quite name. Quentin emerged a few minutes later with a key. "Got you a room," he said. "It's paid for a week. That should give you time to figure out what you want to do." "What I want to do?" Katherine repeated. "Where you want to go, what kind of work you might want, whatever you decide." He handed her the key. "There's a dining room downstairs. Meals are included, and here." He pressed some bills into her hand. "That's for anything else you might need." Katherine stared at the money. "I don't understand. You paid my uncle. You paid for a room. Now you're giving me more money." "Why?" Quentin took off his hat and ran a hand through his dark hair. "Can we go somewhere and talk? Maybe get some coffee?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. They left his horse at the hotel's stable and walked to a small restaurant at the end of the street. It was mid-afternoon, and the place was nearly empty. They took a table by the window, and a tired-looking woman brought them coffee and some bread without being asked. Quentin waited until they were alone before speaking. "I should explain myself." "Yes, you should," Katherine said, finding her voice. "Men don't just hand over $400 and expect nothing in return." "You're right," he agreed. "Most men don't. But I'm not most men, and I'm not expecting anything from you except maybe to listen for a few minutes." Katherine wrapped her hands around the warm coffee cup and waited. Quentin leaned back in his chair, his eyes distant. "I grew up in Kansas. My mother died when I was young, and my father raised me and my sister on a small ranch. When I was 16, my father got into debt with a man named Thomas Carver. Bad debts, the kind that don't get forgiven. Carver came to collect one day and told my father that if he couldn't pay in cash, he would take my sister instead. She was 14 years old." Katherine's breath caught. "My father refused, of course. Tried to fight. Carver shot him dead right there in our yard. Then he took my sister anyway." "Sarah." Her name was Sarah. Quentin's jaw tightened. "I tried to stop them, but I was just a kid. They beat me and left me there with my father's body." "Oh God," Katherine whispered. "Took me 2 years to track Carver down. By the time I found him, Sarah was already dead. Worked to death in one of his brothels in Dodge City. She was 16. His blue eyes met Katherine's, and she saw old pain there, pain that had scarred deep. "I killed Carver. I'm not proud of it, but I won't lie and say I regret it either. Then I left Kansas and never went back." "I'm so sorry," Katherine said softly. "Point is," Quentin continued, "when I walked into your uncle's house today and saw what was happening, I saw my sister. I saw a woman being treated like she was nothing, like she was something to be bought and sold, and I couldn't walk away. I won't walk away from that, not ever again." Katherine felt tears prick her eyes. "So you saved me because of her?" "I saved you because it was right," Quentin said firmly. And because no woman should be at the mercy of men like Grimm or your uncle, that's all. I don't want anything from you. I'm not looking for gratitude or payment or anything else. I just want you to have a choice in your life. That's all I want." The sincerity in his voice, in his eyes, broke through the last of Catherine's defenses. The tears spilled over, and she wiped at them angrily with the back of her hand. "I haven't had a choice in anything for 2 years. Since my parents died, I've been at the mercy of others. My uncle and aunt treated me worse than they treated their dogs. I worked myself to the bone, and when I wasn't useful enough anymore, when feeding me became inconvenient, Martin decided to get rid of me the same way he'd get rid of a horse that had gone lame." "I know," Quentin said gently, "and I'm sorry you went through that, but it's over now. You're free. Truly free. What you do next is entirely up to you." Katherine took a shaky breath and sipped her coffee, trying to calm herself. "Where will you go? What do you do?" "I work for the Henderson Ranch about 10 miles north of here. I'm their foreman." "That's actually true, the part about the water rights. There is a dispute with one of the neighboring ranchers, and I thought your uncle might have information. Turned out he did, just not the kind I was expecting. Will you go back there now? Eventually?" "I need to make sure you're settled first." "You don't need to do that." "I know I don't need to, I want to." Quentin leaned forward, his expression earnest. "Look, I know you have no reason to trust me. I'm a stranger who just turned your life upside down, but I'm going to be straight with you. Lincoln is a rough town. It's getting better since the war ended, but it's still not easy, especially for a woman alone. If you want to stay here, that's fine. I'll make sure you have enough money to get by until you find work. But if you want, there might be a job at the Henderson Ranch. Mrs. Henderson is always looking for help with the house and the cooking. It would be honest work, fair pay, and a place to stay." Katherine considered this. The thought of staying in Lincoln, alone and vulnerable, was frightening. But the thought of going to a ranch with this man she barely knew was equally daunting. Still, something in her gut told her that Quentin Fischer was genuine. He had proven himself already, not just by paying her uncle, but by the way he spoke to her, looked at her. Like she was a person, not a thing. "If I went to this ranch," she said carefully, "it would just be for work. Nothing else." "Nothing else," Quentin confirmed. "You'd work for Mr. and Mrs. Henderson, not for me. You'd have your own quarters, your own wages. If you decided you didn't like it, you could leave any time. No obligations." "Why are you being so kind to me?" Quentin smiled, a small, sad smile. "Maybe I'm trying to make up for not being able to save my sister. Maybe I just believe people should help each other when they can." "Does the reason matter?" Katherine thought about that. "No," she said finally. "I suppose it doesn't. All right. I'll go to the Henderson Ranch, but I need to be clear about something. I'm grateful for what you've done, truly grateful, but I won't be indebted to you or anyone else. I'll work hard and earn my keep. I don't want charity." "Wouldn't expect anything less," Quentin said, and this time his smile was genuine and warm. "You've got spirit, Miss Everly. I respect that." "Katherine," she said. "You can call me Katherine." "Katherine," he repeated, and the way he said her name with that low drawl made something flutter in her chest. "I'm Quentin, though most folks call me Quinn." They finished their coffee, and Quentin explained that they would leave for the Henderson Ranch the next morning. First, they needed to get Katherine a horse and some supplies. They spent the rest of the afternoon in town, visiting the general store and the livery. Quentin helped her pick out a gentle mare with kind eyes and a calm temperament. He also insisted she get a new dress, sturdy boots, and a riding coat. "I can't let you spend more money on me," Katherine protested. "You're not letting me do anything," Quentin replied. "I'm choosing to do it. There's a difference. Besides, you'll need proper clothes for ranch work. Consider it an advance on your wages." By the time they finished, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Quentin walked Katherine back to the hotel and tipped his hat to her at the door. "Get some rest," he said. "We'll leave at first light. I'll come get you for breakfast before we ride out." "Quinn," Katherine said, and he turned back. "Thank you for everything." His expression softened. "You're welcome, Katherine. Sleep well." She watched him walk away, a tall, confident figure against the fading light, and wondered what she had gotten herself into. But for the first time in 2 years, she felt something she had almost forgotten: hope. That night, Katherine lay in the hotel bed, the mattress softer than anything she had slept on at her uncle's ranch, and tried to process everything that had happened. 1 day ago, she had been a virtual slave, trapped and helpless. Now she was free, with a job waiting and a future that was hers to shape. It seemed impossible, like a dream she might wake from at any moment. But it was real. The soreness in her cheek from her uncle's blow was real. The clothes folded on the chair, new and clean, were real. And Quentin Fischer, with his sad past and his unexpected kindness, was real. Katherine thought about him as she drifted off to sleep. He was handsome, certainly, but it was more than that. There was a quiet strength to him, a sense of integrity that shone through in everything he did. He had not leered at her or made suggestive comments. He had treated her with respect and dignity from the moment he met her. And the story about his sister explained so much. The pain in his eyes, the determination to help her, the way he had faced down Grim without hesitation. She fell asleep thinking about blue eyes and a gentle voice saying, "You're free." Morning came too quickly. Katherine woke to pale sunlight streaming through the window and the sounds of the town stirring to life. She washed with the water in the basin, dressed in her new clothes, and braided her dark hair. Looking at herself in the small mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked different somehow, stronger, more alive. Quentin knocked on her door precisely at dawn. "Morning. You ready for breakfast?" They ate in the hotel dining room, a simple meal of eggs, bacon, and biscuits. The food was good, and Katherine ate more than she had in months. At her uncle's ranch, she had always eaten last. Whatever was left after Martin and his wife had their fill. "You're looking better already," Quentin observed. "Got some color back in your face." "I feel better," Katherine admitted. "I know that probably sounds strange given everything that happened yesterday, but I do." "Doesn't sound strange at all. You're out from under your uncle's thumb. That's worth celebrating." After breakfast, they collected their horses from the livery. Katherine's mare nickered softly when she approached, and she stroked the animal's nose, feeling a connection already. She had always loved horses but had rarely been allowed to ride at her uncle's ranch. "What's her name?" Katherine asked the stable boy. "Don't rightly know, miss. Fella who sold her didn't say." "Then I'll call her Grace," Katherine decided, "because she came to me by grace." Quentin smiled at that. "Grace it is, ready to ride." The journey to the Henderson ranch took most of the morning. They followed a well-worn trail north out of Lincoln, through scrubland dotted with juniper and piñon trees. The landscape was harsh but beautiful in its own way, all red rocks and vast sky. Quentin kept their pace moderate, mindful that Katherine might not be used to long rides. They talked as they rode, carefully at first, then with increasing ease. Quentin told her about the Henderson ranch, which raised cattle and horses. Robert Henderson was a fair man, a former Texas Ranger who had settled in New Mexico with his wife Margaret after the Civil War. They had no children but employed about a dozen hands year-round, more during roundup and branding season. "Margaret Henderson runs a tight ship," Quentin said. "She's particular about how things are done, but she's fair and she treats her people well. I think you'll like her." "What about you?" Katherine asked. "How long have you worked there?" 3 years. "I drifted for a while after leaving Kansas, working odd jobs, trying to figure out what to do with myself. Ended up in New Mexico and got hired on at the Henderson place as a regular hand. Worked my way up to foreman about a year ago. You like it there? I do. It's good work, honest work. And the Hendersons are good people. That matters. Katherine sensed there was more he was not saying, but she did not push. They were still getting to know each other, still figuring out how to be around one another. Around midday, they stopped to rest the horses and eat the lunch Quentin had packed. Bread, cheese, and apples. They sat in the shade of a large juniper, the only tree for miles, and looked out at the landscape stretching endlessly before them. "It's so different from where I grew up," Katherine said. "I was born in Missouri. Everything was green there, lots of trees and water. When my parents decided to come west, I thought it would be an adventure. Instead, it was just hard. The land, the weather, the people, all of it was hard." "Why did they come west?" "My father thought he could make a better life for us. He had heard about opportunities in New Mexico, land for claiming, chances to start fresh. He was a dreamer, my father. A good man, but a dreamer." Katherine's voice grew soft with memory. "He claimed a small piece of land about 20 miles from Lincoln, tried to start a farm. But the land was no good for farming, and we didn't have the money or resources to make it work. After 3 years of struggling, they both got sick. Fever took them within a week of each other. I was 18 years old and suddenly alone in the world. That's when you went to your uncle. He was the only family I had left. My father's brother. I thought he would help me, take care of me. Instead, he took what little money my parents had left and used me as free labor." The bitterness in her voice was sharp. "I should have left, tried to make it on my own. But I was scared and grieving, and by the time I realized how bad it was, I felt trapped." "You're not trapped anymore," Quentin said quietly. Katherine looked at him, this man who had appeared in her life like some kind of miracle. "Why aren't you married?" she asked suddenly, then flushed. "I'm sorry, that was too personal." "It's all right," Quentin said easily. "I'm not married because I never found anyone I wanted to marry. I've had relationships, nothing serious. After what happened with my sister, I spent a lot of years angry, moving around, not really settling anywhere. By the time I got to the Henderson ranch and started to build a real life, I guess I just got used to being alone. It's easier sometimes." "Easier but lonelier." "Yeah," he agreed. "That too." They rode on, and by late afternoon the Henderson ranch came into view. It was a substantial spread with a large main house built of adobe and wood, several outbuildings, a barn, corrals, and bunkhouses. Cattle grazed in the distance, and Katherine could see men working near the barn, tending to horses and equipment. As they rode up to the main house, a woman emerged from the front door. She was in her 40s, with steel-gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and a face that was handsome rather than pretty, weathered by years of sun and wind. She wore a practical dress and an apron, and her sharp eyes took in Katherine with one sweeping glance. "Quinn," she said. "You're back sooner than expected. Who's this?" Quentin dismounted and helped Katherine down before responding. "Margaret, this is Katherine Everly. Katherine, this is Mrs. Margaret Henderson, the lady of the house." Margaret's eyes narrowed. "You've brought a woman home with you, that's new." "It's not like that," Quentin said quickly. "Katherine needs a job and a place to stay. I thought you might be able to use help in the house. She's a hard worker and knows her way around a kitchen." Margaret looked Katherine up and down again, not unkindly, just assessing. "Is that so? What's your story, girl? And don't leave anything out. I don't abide lies or half-truths." Katherine lifted her chin, meeting Margaret's gaze directly. She had spent 2 years being cowed and intimidated. She would not start her new life that way. "My uncle was selling me to a man named Harold Grimm to clear a debt. Quinn stopped it and gave me a choice. I chose to come here and work honestly for my keep. I don't expect charity and I won't be treated poorly. But if you're willing to give me a fair chance, I'll work harder than anyone you've ever employed." A slow smile spread across Margaret's face. "Got some backbone, do you? Good, I can't stand weak-willed women. Come inside. We'll talk properly." Katherine glanced at Quentin, who gave her an encouraging nod. She followed Margaret into the house, leaving Quentin to tend to the horses. The interior of the house was cool and well kept, with whitewashed walls and sturdy furniture. Margaret led her to a spacious kitchen that smelled of bread and herbs. She gestured for Katherine to sit at a large wooden table and poured 2 cups of coffee from a pot on the stove. "All right," Margaret said, settling into a chair across from Katherine. "Tell me everything." "Start from the beginning." Katherine did. She told Margaret about her parents' deaths, about living with her uncle, about the gradual realization that she was more prisoner than family. She told her about Grimm and the money and Quentin's unexpected intervention. Margaret listened without interrupting, her expression giving nothing away. When Katherine finished, Margaret was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "Harold Grimm. I've heard of him. He's a bad man, one of the worst. You're lucky Quinn came along when he did." "I know." "Quinn's a good man," Margaret continued. "Best foreman we've ever had. He's fair with the hands, works harder than anyone, and he's got a good head on his shoulders. If he brought you here, it's because he believes you're worth helping. I trust his judgment. So you'll give me a job. On a trial basis. 1 month. You'll help me with the house, the cooking, the cleaning, and whatever else needs doing. I'll pay you $15 a month plus room and board. If it works out after a month, we'll make it permanent and discuss wages again." Fair. It was more than fair. It was generous. "Yes, madam, thank you. Don't thank me yet. I work my people hard and I expect things done right. But I'm not cruel and I don't tolerate cruelty in my house. You'll be treated with respect as long as you earn it. Understood?" "Yes, madam." Margaret's stern expression softened slightly. "You can call me Margaret. Madam makes me feel old. Now let me show you where you'll be staying." The room Margaret showed her was small but clean, with a real bed, a washstand, a small wardrobe, and a window that looked out over the ranch yard. It was in a separate building behind the main house, quarters that had been built for household staff. "It's not much," Margaret said, "but it's private and it's yours." Katherine set down her carpet bag, overwhelmed. "It's perfect," she said softly. "It's more than I've had in a long time." "Good. Get yourself settled, then come back to the house. We'll get you started on dinner preparations. My husband Robert will be back soon, and the hands eat at 6. That's about 15 men most nights, so there's a lot of cooking to do." Katherine spent the next few hours working alongside Margaret, learning the rhythms of the ranch kitchen. Despite her stern demeanor, Margaret was a good teacher, patient and thorough. They prepared an enormous meal of beef stew, cornbread, beans, and apple pie. Katherine worked quickly and efficiently, and she could sense Margaret's approval in the older woman's occasional nods. The hands began arriving at 6, dusty and tired from a day's work. They filed into the dining hall adjacent to the kitchen, a long room with several tables. Quentin came in with them, along with an older man Katherine assumed was Robert Henderson. He was tall and lean, with a weathered face and kind eyes, his hair more silver than gray. "Margaret," Robert said, coming into the kitchen and kissing his wife's cheek. "Something smells amazing." "We had help today," Margaret said, gesturing to Katherine. "Robert, this is Katherine Everly. She's our new household assistant. Katherine, my husband Robert." Robert extended his hand and Katherine shook it. His grip was firm but not crushing. "Pleasure to meet you, Miss Everly. Quinn told me a bit about your situation. You're welcome here." "Thank you, Mr. Henderson." "Robert, please. We don't stand on ceremony much around here." Dinner was a lively affair, with the hands talking and joking as they ate. Katherine helped Margaret serve the food and noticed that Quentin sat at the head of one of the tables, clearly respected by the other men. He caught her eye once and smiled, and she felt that flutter in her chest again. After dinner, the hands dispersed to the bunkhouse or their evening chores, and Katherine helped Margaret clean up. It was late by the time they finished, and Katherine was exhausted in a way that felt good, like honest work rather than exploitation. "You did well today," Margaret said as Katherine was leaving. "I think this arrangement will work out fine." "I hope so," Katherine replied. "And Margaret, thank you for giving me a chance. Thank you for being willing to work for it. Now get some rest. Tomorrow starts early around here." Katherine walked back to her small room in the gathering darkness. The air was cool, and the sky was ablaze with stars, more stars than she had ever seen in her life. She stood outside her door for a moment, just looking up at them, marveling at how much her life had changed in less than 2 days. "Beautiful, isn't it?" She turned to find Quentin approaching, his hat in his hand. "The sky," he clarified. "Out here, away from town lights, you can see everything." "It's incredible," Katherine agreed. "I've never seen anything like it." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, both looking up. Then Quentin said, "How did it go with Margaret?" "Good, I think. She's hired me on a trial basis for a month." "That's great. Margaret doesn't give chances lightly. If she hired you, it means she sees something in you." "I hope I don't disappoint her, or you." Quentin looked at her then, his expression serious. "Katherine, you don't owe me anything. I need you to understand that. What I did yesterday, that was just basic human decency. It doesn't put you in my debt." "I know you said that, but no buts. You're here because you chose to be here, because you wanted a job and a fresh start. That's all. We're friends if you want to be, or just friendly acquaintances if you'd prefer. But there's no obligation between us. All right?" Katherine studied his face in the starlight, looking for any hint of dishonesty or ulterior motive. She found none. "All right," she said. "But Quinn, I do want to be friends. You saved my life in more ways than one. That means something to me," he smiled. "Friends, then, I'd like that." "Good night, Quinn." "Good night, Katherine." She went inside and prepared for bed, her mind full of the day's events. As she lay down, she realized she was smiling. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she was looking forward to tomorrow. The next few weeks passed in a blur of work and new experiences. Katherine threw herself into her duties with determination. She worked alongside Margaret, learning not just the practical tasks of cooking and cleaning, but also the less obvious skills of managing a large household. Margaret taught her how to keep inventory, how to deal with suppliers in town, and how to manage the complex logistics of feeding 15 hungry men 3 times a day. The work was hard, but Katherine thrived on it. Unlike at her uncle's ranch, where her labor had been taken for granted and often criticized, here her efforts were acknowledged and appreciated. Margaret praised her when she did well and corrected her when she made mistakes, but always fairly and without cruelty. Robert was unfailingly kind, and the ranch hands treated her with respect. And then there was Quentin. Katherine saw him every day, sometimes briefly at meals, sometimes longer when he came to the main house to discuss ranch business with Robert. He never made her feel uncomfortable or pushed for more than friendship, but Katherine found herself increasingly aware of him. The way he moved with unconscious grace, the sound of his laugh when one of the hands told a joke at dinner, the quiet competence with which he handled every task. She watched him with the horses one afternoon, gentling a spirited young stallion that had been giving the other hands trouble. His patience and skill were remarkable, his voice low and soothing as he worked with the animal. When he finally got a saddle on the horse and rode it around the corral without incident, the watching hands cheered. Quentin just grinned, pleased but not boastful. "He's good with animals," Margaret said, appearing beside Katherine at the corral fence. "Good with people, too. The men respect him." "I can see why," Katherine said. Margaret gave her a shrewd look. "He's a good man, one of the best I've known. But he's got ghosts, Quinn does, things in his past that haunt him, his sister." "So he told you about that?" Margaret nodded approvingly. "Not many people know. He doesn't talk about it much. But it shaped him, that tragedy. Made him the man he is, for better and worse." "What do you mean?" "I mean he's the kind of man who'll always help someone in need, but he's also the kind who keeps people at arm's length. Afraid to get too close, I think. Afraid of losing someone again." Margaret patted Katherine's arm. "Just something to keep in mind." Katherine pondered that conversation often over the following days. She noticed that while Quentin was friendly with everyone, he did not seem to have close confidants. He kept himself slightly apart, even from the men he supervised. And with her, despite the easy friendship that was developing between them, there was always a careful distance he maintained. Still, they found themselves spending more time together. In the evenings after dinner, when the work was done, they would sometimes sit on the porch of the main house and talk. They discussed everything from their childhoods to their dreams for the future to their opinions on the political situation in the territory. Katherine discovered that Quentin was well-read and thoughtful, with a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard and made her laugh. One evening, about 3 weeks after Katherine's arrival, they sat watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. Quentin was whittling a piece of wood, his hands moving with practiced ease, while Katherine mended one of Robert's shirts. "What are you making?" she asked. He held up the piece of wood, and she could see it was beginning to take the shape of a horse. "Just something to keep my hands busy. I like to whittle, helps me think. It's beautiful, you're very talented. It's just a hobby." He turned the wood over, examining it critically. "My father taught me, one of the few good memories I have of him." "What was he like, your father?" Quentin was quiet for a moment. "He was a hard man. Not cruel, but not warm either. He loved my sister and me in his way, but he wasn't good at showing it. When he died, part of me was sad, but part of me was angry. Angry that he got himself killed over money, that he couldn't protect Sarah, that he left me alone to deal with the aftermath." "You were so young," Katherine said softly. "You shouldn't have had to deal with any of that." "No, I shouldn't have, but we don't get to choose what life throws at us. We only get to choose how we respond. And you chose to become someone who helps others, someone who stands up to men like Grimm. I chose to try to be better than my father was, to not let money or pride matter more than doing what's right." He looked at her, his blue eyes intense in the fading light. "Does that make sense?" "It makes perfect sense," Katherine said. "And I think you've succeeded. You're a good man, Quinn, one of the best I've ever known." He looked away, seemingly uncomfortable with the praise. "I'm just doing what anyone should do." "But most people don't. You do. That makes you special." Before Quentin could respond, Robert came out onto the porch. "Quinn, got a minute? Need to talk about moving the cattle to the north pasture." "Sure." Quentin stood, giving Katherine an apologetic smile. "I'll see you later." She watched him go, her heart doing that fluttering thing again. When had her gratitude and friendship started to become something more? She was not sure, but she could not deny the feelings growing inside her. The way her pulse quickened when she saw him. The way she found herself looking for him during the day. The way his smile could lift her spirits even when she was tired and sore from work. It was dangerous, she knew. Quentin had made it clear he was not looking for a relationship. He had saved her and given her a chance at a new life. But that did not mean he wanted anything more than friendship. And she had no business developing romantic feelings for him when she had only been at the ranch for 3 weeks, when her life was still so uncertain. But the heart does not listen to logic, Katherine was discovering. It wants what it wants, regardless of practicality or wisdom. The next day, Margaret sent Katherine into town to pick up supplies. One of the hands, a young man named Charlie, accompanied her for safety. They took a wagon and made good time, arriving in Lincoln by mid-morning. Katherine was collecting the order from the general store when she heard a familiar voice behind her. Well, well, if it isn't Katherine Everly. She turned, her blood running cold. Harold Grimm stood in the doorway, blocking the exit. He looked the same as he had 3 weeks ago, but his expression was harder, meaner. "Mr. Grimm," she said, keeping her voice steady. "Excuse me, I need to get past." "Not so fast. We have unfinished business, you and I." "We have no business. Now please move." Grimm stepped closer, and Katherine could smell whiskey on his breath. "Your uncle took my money. You owe me." "I owe you nothing. That was between you and him." "That's not how I see it." His hand shot out and grabbed her wrist. "You're coming with me." Katherine tried to pull away, but his grip was like iron. "Let me go." "I said you're coming," with a fist connected with Grimm's jaw, sending him staggering backward. Charlie, the young ranch hand, stood between Katherine and Grimm, his face flushed with anger. "Get your hands off her." Grimm recovered quickly, his hand moving toward his gun, but Charlie was faster. He had his revolver out and pointed before Grimm could draw. "Don't," Charlie warned. "I'm a better shot than you, and there are witnesses. You lay a hand on Miss Katherine again, and I'll shoot you dead and claim self-defense." Grimm's eyes blazed with fury, but he was smart enough to recognize the danger. "This isn't over," he growled. "Tell Fischer I'm coming for him, and for her." He stalked out of the store, and Katherine released the breath she had been holding. Her hands were shaking. Charlie holstered his gun and turned to her with concern. "You all right, Miss Katherine?" "Yes, thank you, Charlie. You may have just saved my life." "Quinn would have my hide if I let anything happen to you. Come on, let's get these supplies loaded and get back to the ranch. Mr. Henderson needs to know about this." The ride back to the ranch seemed to take forever. Katherine's mind raced, fear and anger warring inside her. She had thought that nightmare was behind her, but Grimm had clearly not forgotten or forgiven. And now he had threatened Quentin. When they arrived back at the ranch, Charlie immediately went to find Quentin and Robert while Katherine unloaded supplies with Margaret's help. She told Margaret what had happened, and the older woman's face grew grim. "Grimm's a rattlesnake," Margaret said. "Venomous and unpredictable, but don't you worry. Robert and Quinn will handle this." Minutes later, Quentin came striding toward the house, his expression thunderous. Robert was right behind him. They found Katherine in the kitchen, putting away the last of the supplies. "Are you all right?" Quentin asked immediately, his hands on her shoulders as he searched her face. "Did he hurt you?" "No," Charlie stopped him. "But Quinn, he threatened you. He said he's coming for you." "Let him come," Quentin said flatly. "I'm not worried about Grimm." "But I am." Katherine's voice rose with emotion. "You've done so much for me already. I can't let you get hurt because of me. You're not letting me do anything. This is my choice." His hands were still on her shoulders, warm and steady. "Katherine, look at me." She met his eyes, those blue eyes that had become so familiar, so dear. "I won't let Grimm hurt you," Quentin said firmly. "I promise. Whatever it takes, I'll keep you safe." "That's what I'm afraid of," she whispered. "What if keeping me safe costs you your life?" Something shifted in Quentin's expression, something vulnerable and raw. "You'd care if something happened to me." "Of course I'd care. Quinn, you're not just the man who saved me. You're my friend. You're important to me." She almost said more, almost confessed the deeper feelings that had been growing in her heart, but she held back. This was not the time. Robert cleared his throat, reminding them they were not alone. Right. Well, first thing tomorrow, I'm going to ride into town and talk to the sheriff about Grim. What he did today was assault, and he needs to be held accountable. The sheriff won't do anything, Quentin said grimly. Grim has money and influence. Catherine's just a woman with no family and no standing. Who do you think the law will believe? Maybe so, but we have to try, Robert insisted. In the meantime, Katherine doesn't go anywhere alone. Not into town, not to the barn, nowhere. One of us is with her at all times. Agreed. Agreed, Quentin said. Katherine wanted to protest that she was not a child who needed constant supervision, but she understood the danger. Grim was clearly unstable and vengeful. It would be foolish to take unnecessary risks. That night, Katherine lay awake in her small room, unable to sleep. Every sound made her jump. Every shadow seemed threatening. She was terrified not just for herself but for Quentin. If something happened to him because he had helped her, she would never forgive herself. Around midnight, she heard a soft knock on her door. She froze. "Who is it?" "It's Quinn." "I saw your light was still on. Can I come in?" She wrapped a shawl around her nightgown and opened the door. Quentin stood there in the moonlight, still dressed, a rifle in his hand. "I'm keeping watch tonight," he explained. "Making sure the ranch is secure, but I wanted to check on you." "You doing all right?" "I'm scared," Katherine admitted. "I keep thinking about what could have happened if Charlie hadn't been there. What might happen next time?" "There won't be a next time. I won't let there be. You can't watch me every minute of every day, Quinn. And you can't fight the whole world to keep me safe. I can try." He leaned against the door frame, his expression serious. "Katherine, I need you to understand something. What happened with my sister, not being able to protect her, it's haunted me for 12 years. When I met you, when I saw what your uncle was doing, it was like getting a second chance. A chance to do what I couldn't do for Sarah. I know that might sound selfish, like I'm using you to work out my own guilt, but it's more than that now." "What do you mean?" "I mean that somewhere along the way, keeping you safe stopped being about my sister and started being about you. About Katherine Everly, who's smart and strong and determined. Who works harder than anyone I've ever met. Who makes me laugh and makes me think and makes me want to be a better man." He took a breath. "I care about you, Katherine, more than I probably should, more than I meant to." Katherine's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "Quinn, I'm not asking for anything," he said quickly. "I know this is complicated. I know you've been through hell, and the last thing you need is someone pressuring you into something you might not want. But I needed you to know. I needed to be honest." She stepped closer to him, her hand reaching out to touch his cheek. He went very still, barely breathing. "You're not pressuring me," she said softly. "And for what it's worth, I care about you too, more than I probably should, more than I meant to." His eyes searched hers. "Yeah? Yeah." Slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, Quentin lowered his head and kissed her. It was gentle and sweet, a question more than a demand. Katherine's eyes closed, and she kissed him back, her hand sliding from his cheek to the back of his neck. For a moment, the world fell away, all the fear and uncertainty fading until there was nothing but the two of them and this perfect connection. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. Quentin rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that for weeks," he confessed. "I've wanted you to," she replied. He smiled, and it transformed his face, making him look younger, happier. "We should probably take this slow, figure out what this means." "Probably," Katherine agreed. "But Quinn, I'm glad this is happening. I'm glad it's you." "Me too." He straightened reluctantly. "I should let you sleep, but I'll be right outside if you need anything. You're safe, Katherine. I promise." She watched him settle onto a chair outside her door, the rifle across his lap, and felt a rush of affection so strong it almost hurt. This man, this good, damaged, wonderful man, was willing to spend the night keeping watch over her. How had she gotten so lucky? The next morning, Robert rode into town as promised, taking Charlie and 2 other hands with him for backup. Quentin stayed at the ranch, refusing to let Katherine out of his sight. They went about their usual work, but there was a new awareness between them, a heightened consciousness of every look and touch. Margaret noticed, of course. She noticed everything. "So you two finally figured it out," she said to Katherine while they were kneading bread dough. Katherine felt her face heat. "Figured what out? Don't play coy with me. I've seen the way you look at each other. About time you both stopped dancing around it." "It's complicated," Katherine said. "Love usually is. But Quinn's a good man and you're a good woman. You deserve happiness, both of you." Margaret punched down her dough with more force than necessary. "Just don't let fear hold you back. Life's too short and too uncertain out here to waste time being scared." Those words stuck with Katherine throughout the day. Life was too short. She had already lost so much, and so had Quentin. Maybe it was time to stop being afraid and start reaching for what she wanted. Robert returned from town in the late afternoon, his expression grim. He called Quentin into his office and they talked for a long time with the door closed. Katherine tried not to eavesdrop, but she could not help being anxious. When they finally emerged, she was waiting in the kitchen. "What did the sheriff say?" she asked. Robert sighed. "About what Quinn predicted. Said there wasn't much he could do based on a he said, she said situation. Charlie's testimony helps, but without Grimm actually committing a crime beyond grabbing your wrist, the sheriff says his hands are tied." "That's ridiculous," Katherine said angrily. "He assaulted me, I know, and I agree, but the law out here is still more interested in protecting men of means than protecting women. I'm sorry, Katherine." Quentin's jaw was tight with frustration. "There's more. The sheriff let it slip that Grimm's been asking questions about the ranch, about when you go into town, about whether you're ever alone. He's planning something." Katherine's fear spiked. "Then I'll leave. I'll go somewhere else, somewhere he can't find me." "No," Quentin said firmly. "Running won't solve this. Grimm will just follow and then you'll be alone and vulnerable. At least here you've got people to protect you. But I'm putting all of you in danger." "That's our choice to make," Robert said. "Katherine, you're part of this family now. We take care of our own. Grimm wants a fight, he'll get one. But we'll do it smart, on our terms." Over the next few days, the ranch became a fortress. Extra guards were posted and everyone stayed armed and alert. Katherine hated it, hated feeling like a burden, hated that her presence had brought danger to these good people who had shown her nothing but kindness. But Quentin would not let her wallow in guilt. "This isn't your fault," he told her repeatedly. "Grimm is the one choosing to be a vengeful snake. You're just trying to live your life." A week passed with no sign of Grimm. Then another. The tension began to ease slightly, though no one let their guard down completely. Katherine and Quentin grew closer during this time, stealing moments together when they could, walks in the evening, conversations over coffee, kisses in the shadows. It was terrifying and wonderful all at once. Katherine had never felt this way about anyone before. Quentin was patient and gentle, never pushing for more than she was ready to give, but the passion between them was undeniable. She found herself thinking about a future with him, about building a life together, about all the things that had seemed impossible just a few weeks ago. One evening, about 6 weeks after Katherine had arrived at the ranch, Margaret pulled her aside after dinner. "Your trial month is up," she said. "Actually, it's been up for a while, but with everything happening, I forgot to mention it. You want to stay on permanent?" "Yes," Katherine said without hesitation. "If you'll have me, we'll have you. $20 a month and room and board, and Katherine, you've been a blessing to this household, I mean that. The praise made Catherine's eyes water. "Thank you, Margaret, for everything, for giving me a chance when you had no reason to." "I had every reason to. Quinn trusted you and I trust Quinn, plus you've proven yourself 10 times over." Margaret hugged her, a rare show of affection from the normally reserved woman. "Now go tell that boy of yours before he wears a hole in the porch from pacing." Quentin was indeed on the porch, leaning against the railing and watching the sunset. Catherine came up beside him, and he automatically put his arm around her waist, pulling her close. "Margaret made my position permanent," she said. "That's great." He kissed the top of her head. "You deserve it." "I've been thinking," Catherine said carefully, "about the future. About what I want." "Yeah, what do you want?" She turned to face him, her hands on his chest. "I want to stay here. I want to keep working, keep building a life in this place. And I want to do it with you, if you want that too." Quentin's expression was unreadable. "Catherine, you know I care about you, but are you sure? I'm not an easy man. I've got a past and problems, and so do I," she interrupted. "We all do. But that doesn't mean we don't deserve happiness. And you make me happy, Quinn. Happier than I ever thought I could be." "You make me happy too," he admitted. "Happier than I've been since before Sarah died. When I'm with you, the ghosts don't seem as heavy. The guilt doesn't weigh as much. You make me feel like maybe I can be more than just the man who failed his sister." "You are so much more than that," Catherine said fiercely. "You're kind and brave and good. You're the man who saved me, the man I'm falling in love with." The words were out before she could stop them. Quentin went very still. "You're falling in love with me." "Yes," she said, deciding to be brave. "I am. I know it's fast. I know it's maybe not smart given everything that's happened, but it's true. I'm falling in love with you, Quentin Fischer." A slow smile spread across his face, and he cupped her face in his hands. "Good," he said. "Because I'm falling in love with you too, Katherine Everly. Have been for weeks now." They kissed, and it was different from the other kisses they had shared. This one was a promise, a commitment, a declaration. When they broke apart, both were smiling. "So what now?" Catherine asked. "Now we take it one day at a time. We keep you safe from Grimm. We keep working and building our lives here. And when the time is right, when things are settled and secure, I'm going to ask you to marry me." Catherine's heart soared. "And I'm going to say yes." "Good to know." He kissed her again, longer this time, deeper. When they finally came up for air, he said, "I never thought I'd get this. A chance at a real life with someone I love. Thank you for taking a chance on me." "Thank you for saving me," she replied. "In every way a person can be saved." They stood there in the fading light, wrapped in each other's arms, and for a moment, everything was perfect. But perfection, Catherine was learning, was always temporary in the real world. The attack came 3 days later, in the dead of night. Catherine woke to the sound of gunfire and shouting. She threw on her clothes and stumbled out of her room to find chaos. The barn was on fire, flames leaping high into the dark sky. Ranch hands were running everywhere, some fighting the fire, others returning gunfire toward the darkness beyond the ranch buildings. Quentin appeared out of the confusion, grabbing Catherine's arm. Inside the main house now, he half dragged her across the yard as bullets kicked up dirt around them. They made it to the house, where Margaret was already loading rifles with grim efficiency. Robert was at the window, his own rifle at the ready. "Grim?" Catherine asked, though she already knew the answer. "Has to be," Robert said. "He brought men with him, maybe half a dozen." "Where are they?" "Out beyond the corrals, using the darkness as cover." Robert fired, and someone in the darkness cried out. "But they're not as good as they think they are." The battle raged for what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes. The ranch hands were well trained and heavily armed, and Grimm's hired guns were no match for them. Gradually, the gunfire from the darkness lessened and then stopped altogether. Quentin went out cautiously, several hands backing him up. They found two bodies in the darkness, both strangers, hired guns who would not be missed. But there was no sign of Grim. He ran, Charlie said with disgust. Soon as things went bad, he cut and ran, left his men to die. Coward, Quentin agreed. He turned back to the main house where Katherine was watching from the door. Even from a distance, she could see the fury in his posture. The barn fire was eventually extinguished, but the damage was extensive. They had lost a building, some equipment, and several horses. By some miracle, no one at the ranch had been killed, though two hands had minor injuries. As dawn broke, Robert gathered everyone together. "This ends now," he said. "Grim crossed a line. He didn't just threaten Katherine. He attacked all of us, destroyed our property. That's a crime even the useless sheriff can't ignore. Quinn, you and I are riding into town to press charges. We've got dead bodies and witnesses. Grim is going to answer for this." But when Robert and Quentin arrived in Lincoln with their evidence and their witnesses, they found that Grim was nowhere to be found. His hotel room was empty, his horse gone. He had fled in the night, probably heading back to Texas. "We'll put out word," the sheriff said, looking uncomfortable. "Send telegrams to the Texas Rangers, let them know he's wanted for arson and assault, but I can't promise he'll be caught." "He'd better be," Quentin said quietly, dangerously. "Because if he's not, if he ever comes back here, I'll kill him myself, and that's a promise." The sheriff wisely did not argue. Back at the ranch, Katherine was simultaneously relieved and anxious. Relieved that Grim was gone, anxious that he might return. What if he comes back? She asked Quentin. "Then we'll deal with him," Quentin replied. "But Katherine, I don't think he will. Grim is a coward at heart. He only attacks when he thinks he has the advantage. After last night, he knows we're too strong, too prepared. He'll find some other victim, unfortunately, but it won't be you, not on my watch." Days turned into weeks, and there was no sign of Grim. The barn was rebuilt, stronger than before. The ranch returned to its normal rhythms. And slowly, Katherine began to believe that maybe, just maybe, she was finally safe. Fall arrived, bringing cooler temperatures and stunning colors to the landscape. Katherine had been at the ranch for 4 months now, and it felt like home in a way no place ever had. She loved the work, loved the people, loved the sense of belonging. And she loved Quentin. That love deepened with every passing day, growing from the initial spark of attraction into something solid and enduring. They spent every spare moment together, learning each other's quirks and habits, sharing dreams and fears. One evening in October, Quentin asked her to take a walk with him after dinner. They strolled to a spot overlooking a small valley, where the setting sun painted everything in gold and amber. It was beautiful, breathtaking. "I have something to say," Quentin began, and Katherine's heart started to race. "I know we talked about this before, about waiting until things were settled. Well, things feel pretty settled now. Grim hasn't been seen or heard from in 2 months. You've made a life here. I've got steady work. We're both in a good place." "Yes," Katherine agreed, not sure where he was going but feeling hope rise in her chest. Quentin took her hands in his, and she realized he was nervous. "Katherine Everly, I love you. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me. You make me laugh, you make me think, you make me want to be a better man. I can't imagine my life without you in it." He dropped to one knee and Katherine's breath caught. "I'm asking your permission," Quentin said, his voice rough with emotion. "Will you marry me? Will you be my wife?" Tears spilled down Katherine's cheeks, but they were happy tears. "You're asking my permission, always," he said firmly. "I'll never take away your choice, your freedom. Everything between us is because we both want it, so I'm asking, will you marry me?" "Yes," Katherine said, pulling him to his feet. "Yes, yes, yes. I love you, Quinn. Of course I'll marry you." He swept her into his arms and kissed her thoroughly, and Katherine felt like she was flying. This man, this wonderful man who had saved her and given her freedom and now was asking for her hand in marriage, was going to be her husband. It seemed too good to be true, but it was real. It was happening. They walked back to the ranch hand in hand, and Quentin announced their engagement at dinner. The hands cheered and congratulated them. Margaret hugged them both, her eyes suspiciously bright. Robert shook Quentin's hand and kissed Katherine's cheek. "Welcome to the family officially," he said. The wedding was planned for November, a small ceremony at the ranch with just their ranch family in attendance. Katherine wore a dress that Margaret helped her sew, simple but beautiful in cream-colored cotton. Quentin wore his best clothes and looked so handsome that Katherine's heart stuttered when she saw him. The local pastor performed the ceremony in the ranch's parlor, with Robert giving Katherine away and Margaret standing as her witness. When the pastor said, "You may kiss your bride," Quentin did so with such tenderness and joy that Katherine felt tears prick her eyes again. They had a celebration afterward, with food and music and dancing. The hands toasted the newlyweds repeatedly, and there was much laughter and happiness. As the evening wore on, Quentin and Katherine slipped away to the small house that Robert had given them as a wedding present, a 2-room cabin at the edge of the ranch property. "It's ours," Quentin said as he carried her over the threshold. "Our home." Katherine looked around at the simple but cozy space. There was a bed, a table and chairs, a stove, shelves for their belongings. It was small, but it was theirs. "It's perfect," she said. That night, they consummated their marriage with gentleness and passion, learning each other in this new, intimate way. Quentin was careful with her, making sure she felt safe and cherished. Katherine had been nervous, having no experience in such matters, but Quentin's patience and love made everything feel natural and right. Afterwards, they lay tangled together in the darkness, and Katherine felt more content than she ever had in her life. "I can't believe this is real," she murmured, "that I'm your wife, that we have a home and a future together." "Believe it," Quentin said, kissing her forehead. "This is real, you're real, we're real. And I'm going to spend every day of the rest of my life making sure you never regret saying yes." "I could never regret it," Katherine assured him. "You're everything I never knew I needed." They fell asleep in each other's arms, safe and happy and loved. Life as a married couple fell into a comfortable rhythm. Katherine continued to work in the main house with Margaret during the day, while Quentin managed the ranch hands and handled all the practical matters of running a successful cattle operation. In the evenings, they would return to their cabin, cook dinner together, talk about their days, and simply enjoy being together. Winter came, bringing snow and cold temperatures. Katherine had never experienced a New Mexico winter before, and she found it beautiful in its harshness. She and Quentin would sit by their stove in the evenings, her reading while he whittled, and it all felt so domestic and wonderful. Christmas was a special celebration, with the whole ranch gathering for a feast in the main house. Katherine had been working on a surprise for Quentin, a new winter coat she had been sewing in secret. When he opened it on Christmas morning, his face lit up with delight. "You made this?" he asked, examining the careful stitching. "With help from Margaret," Katherine admitted. "Do you like it?" "I love it, and I love you." He pulled her close and kissed her soundly, not caring that they had an audience. Quentin's gift to her was equally thoughtful, a beautiful leather-bound journal and a set of pens. "For your thoughts," he explained. "I know you like to read. Maybe you'd like to write too." Katherine was touched beyond words. That night she wrote her first entry. "Today was perfect. I am married to the most wonderful man in the world, and I am happier than I ever imagined I could be. This time last year I was a prisoner in my uncle's house, hopeless and afraid. Now I am free, loved, and building a life I never dreamed possible. Thank you, Quinn, for giving me this. Spring arrived, bringing new life to the land. The ranch was busy with calving season and preparations for the spring roundup. Quentin was gone long hours, working with the hands to manage the influx of new calves and handle all the tasks that came with this busy season. One morning in April, Katherine woke feeling queasy. She barely made it outside before she was sick. Margaret, who had come by with some fresh eggs, took one look at her and smiled knowingly. "How long have you been feeling like this?" Margaret asked. "This is the third morning," Katherine admitted. "I think it might be something I ate." "Or someone you married," Margaret said dryly. "Katherine, I think you might be pregnant." The word hit Katherine like a thunderbolt. Pregnant. She had been so focused on her new life and her marriage that she had not even considered the possibility, though looking back, she realized her monthly courses were late. "Do you really think so?" "I'd bet money on it." "We should get the doctor out here to confirm, but I've seen enough pregnant women to recognize the signs." The doctor came the next week and confirmed Margaret's suspicions. Katherine was about 2 months along, with a baby expected in late October or early November. She was simultaneously thrilled and terrified. A baby. She was going to be a mother. Telling Quentin was one of the most nerve-wracking things she had ever done. They were in their cabin after dinner when she finally worked up the courage. "Quinn, I have something to tell you." He looked up from the saddle he was repairing. "What's wrong? You've been quiet all evening." "Nothing's wrong. At least I don't think so, but it's big news and I'm not sure how you'll feel about it." Concern crossed his face. "Katherine, you're worrying me. Just tell me." "I'm pregnant," she blurted out. "We're going to have a baby." Quentin froze, the saddle forgotten. "You're pregnant. We're having a baby. In October or November, according to the doctor. I know it's fast. We've only been married 5 months." And she did not get to finish because Quentin had crossed the room and swept her into his arms, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around. "We're having a baby," he shouted, his face split by the biggest smile she had ever seen. "Katherine, that's incredible," relief flooded through her. "So you're happy." "Happy, I'm thrilled, I'm going to be a father." He set her down gently, suddenly cautious. "Should I not be swinging you around? Is that bad for the baby?" Katherine laughed. "I think the baby is fine." "But Quinn, are you sure? This is a big responsibility." "I'm sure," he said firmly. He placed his hand on her still flat stomach, his expression full of wonder. "Our baby, a piece of you and me, I can't think of anything more amazing." They spent the evening talking about names and nurseries and all the things they would need to prepare. Quentin was like a child himself, so excited and full of ideas. Watching him, Katherine felt her own joy and excitement grow. They were going to be parents. They were going to bring a new life into this world, a life created from their love. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Katherine continued working in the main house through the summer, though Margaret eventually insisted she take on lighter duties. Quentin was attentive to the point of being overprotective, constantly worrying about Katherine's health and comfort. "I'm pregnant, not made of glass," she told him one evening when he tried to carry her across a puddle. "I know, but I want to take care of you," he replied. "Let me take care of you." She could not argue with that. After spending so much of her life being neglected or mistreated, having someone care for her so deeply was still somewhat overwhelming. But she was learning to accept it, to accept that she deserved love and consideration. In September, they began preparing the second room of their cabin as a nursery. Quentin built a cradle with his own hands, carefully sanding and finishing the wood until it was smooth and beautiful. Katherine sewed blankets and tiny clothes, marveling at how small everything was. A baby. Their baby would be here soon. The baby came on a chilly night in early November, 2 weeks earlier than expected. Catherine's labor started in the evening, and by midnight, she was in the grip of powerful contractions. The doctor had been summoned, and Margaret was with her, coaching her through the pain. Quentin paced outside the cabin, unable to sit still, worry etched on his face. Robert stayed with him, trying to distract him with conversation, but it was useless. Every time Catherine cried out, Quentin flinched like he had been struck. "This is torture," Quentin said, listening to her in pain and not being able to do anything. "Welcome to fatherhood," Robert said dryly. "The worrying never stops, I'm told." Finally, after hours that felt like days, a baby's cry split the night air. Quentin's head snapped up and he started for the cabin door, but Robert held him back. "Give them a minute. They'll call you when they're ready." Those minutes felt like hours too, but eventually Margaret appeared in the doorway, smiling. "Come meet your son." A son. He had a son. Quentin entered the cabin on shaky legs. Catherine was in bed, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. She looked up as he approached, and her smile was like the sun. "Meet your son," she said softly. Quentin looked down at the baby and felt his heart expand in his chest. The baby was tiny and red-faced, with a shock of dark hair and eyes that were trying to focus on the world around him. He was the most beautiful thing Quentin had ever seen. "Can I hold him?" Quentin asked, his voice rough with emotion. "Of course." Catherine carefully transferred the baby into Quentin's arms. Quentin cradled his son, overwhelmed by the tiny weight, the fragility, the complete trust. This little person was his and Catherine's. A tear slid down his cheek. "Hey there, little man," he whispered. "I'm your daddy. I promise I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to protect you and love you and make sure you have a better life than I had. I promise." The baby made a small sound, and Quentin laughed through his tears. He looked at Catherine, who was watching him with love shining in her eyes. "We need to name him," she said. They had discussed names for months, unable to settle on one they both loved. But now, holding his son, Quentin knew exactly what the baby's name should be. "Samuel," he said. "After my father, but we'll call him Sam, and he'll be nothing like my father was. He'll be better. We'll make sure of that." "Samuel Fischer," Catherine said, testing the name. "It's perfect." Over the next few days, they adjusted to life as new parents. It was exhausting and overwhelming and wonderful all at once. Sam was a good baby, not colicky, and he seemed to enjoy being held and sung to. Quentin took to fatherhood with enthusiasm, helping with everything from diaper changes to midnight feedings. "I never knew I could love someone this much," he told Catherine one night as they watched Sam sleep. "I mean, I love you more than anything, but this is different. It's like my heart grew bigger to make room for him." "I know exactly what you mean," Catherine agreed. She leaned against her husband and they sat in comfortable silence, both marveling at the miracle they had created. As Sam grew from a newborn into an infant, the ranch continued to thrive. Robert and Margaret treated Sam like their own grandson, doting on him and spoiling him shamelessly. The ranch hands were equally smitten, and Sam was never lacking for attention or affection. When Sam was 6 months old, Catherine discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the news was less surprising but no less joyful. "Looks like Sam is going to be a big brother," she told Quentin. Their second child, a daughter they named Grace Elizabeth, was born in December of 1880, just over a year after Sam. She had Catherine's green eyes and a head full of blonde hair, and Quentin fell in love all over again. "2 children," he marveled, holding Grace while Sam toddled around at his feet. "I have 2 children. How did I get so lucky?" "We both got lucky," Catherine corrected. She picked up Sam and settled beside Quentin, and they sat together as a family, complete and happy. Life fell into a new rhythm with two small children. Katherine continued to work part-time for Margaret, though her primary focus was now her family. Quentin had been promoted to ranch manager, with more responsibility and better pay. They were saving money with the goal of eventually buying their own small ranch, though they were in no hurry to leave the Henderson spread. The years passed in a blur of ordinary moments that were anything but ordinary to Katherine. She watched her children grow and learn, watched her husband become an even better man, watched their love deepen and mature. She kept her journal faithfully, documenting their life together, wanting to remember every precious detail. In the spring of 1883, when Katherine was pregnant with their third child, word finally came about Harold Grimm. He had been arrested in Texas for attempting to force another woman into marriage, and during the arrest, he had pulled a gun on the sheriff. He was shot and killed trying to escape. Katherine felt no joy at his death, only relief that he could never hurt anyone again. "It's finally over," she told Quentin. "Really over." "It was over a long time ago," Quentin replied. "The moment you chose to be free. But yeah, it's good to know he can't hurt anyone else." Their third child, another son they named Robert after their employer and friend, was born in October. 2 years later came another daughter, Margaret. The cabin that had once felt spacious now felt cramped with 4 children, and Robert Henderson offered them a larger house on the property. "You've both earned it," Robert said. "You've been loyal workers and good friends. Consider it a thank you." By 1886, Katherine was 31 years old and Quentin was 36. They had 4 healthy children, a comfortable home, steady work, and more happiness than either had ever dreamed possible. Looking back on that terrible day 8 years ago when her uncle had tried to sell her to Harold Grimm, Katherine could hardly believe how much her life had changed. One evening, after the children were asleep, Katherine and Quentin sat on the porch of their house, watching the stars come out. It was their favorite time of day, these quiet moments when it was just the two of them. "Do you remember the day we met?" Katherine asked. "When you walked into my uncle's house?" "I remember," Quentin said. "I remember thinking you were the bravest person I'd ever seen, standing up to Grimm and your uncle even though you were terrified. I remember thinking you were either crazy or an angel," Katherine said with a laugh. "Who walks into a situation like that and just decides to save a stranger?" "Someone who knew what it was like to lose everything and wanted to help someone else have a different ending." Quentin took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "Best $400 I ever spent." "You didn't buy me," Katherine reminded him, a familiar refrain between them. "I know." "I bought your freedom. There's a difference." He kissed her hand. "And you've given me so much more in return. A home, a family, a reason to wake up happy every morning. I love you, Katherine Fischer, more today than yesterday and less than tomorrow." "I love you too," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for saving me. Thank you for giving me freedom. Thank you for asking permission. Thank you for all of it." "Thank you for saying yes," he replied, "to all of it." They sat in comfortable silence, two people who had found each other in the unlikeliest of circumstances and built a life together through love and determination. The Wild West could be harsh and unforgiving, but it could also be beautiful and full of possibility. They had experienced both the darkness and the light, and they had come through it together, stronger for the trials they had faced. In 1887, Robert and Margaret Henderson announced their retirement. They were getting older and wanted to spend their remaining years traveling and resting. They offered to sell the ranch to Quentin and Katherine at a fair price, with terms they could afford. "We trust you to keep this place thriving," Robert said. "You've both proven yourselves time and again. The ranch should be yours." It took some planning and sacrifice, but by the end of the year, the Henderson Ranch officially became the Fischer Ranch. Katherine and Quentin were now landowners, with their own successful operation and a dozen employees who had agreed to stay on. "Can you believe this?" Katherine asked as they stood looking at their land, their home, their future. "8 years ago I was being sold like cattle. Now I'm a ranch owner." "You earned it," Quentin said. "Every bit of it. You worked hard, raised our children, built this life with me. This success is as much yours as it is mine. More, even." The children grew. Sam showed an aptitude for working with horses, just like his father. Grace was bright and curious, always asking questions and wanting to know how things worked. Young Robert was quiet and thoughtful, preferring books to ranch work, which Katherine encouraged. And Margaret, the baby, was fearless and adventurous, keeping them all on their toes. In 1890, Katherine gave birth to their fifth and final child, a son they named Daniel. By then, Katherine was 35 and decided that 5 children were more than enough. Quentin agreed, content with their large, boisterous family. The years continued to pass, bringing both joys and sorrows. Robert Henderson died peacefully in 1892, with Margaret following 2 years later. Katherine and Quentin mourned them deeply, grateful for the chance and the love they had been given. They were buried on the ranch property, their graves marked with simple but elegant stones. The turn of the century came, bringing changes to the territory and eventually statehood for New Mexico in 1912. Katherine and Quentin adapted with the times, modernizing their ranch while maintaining the values of hard work and fair treatment that had always defined them. Their children grew into adulthood. Sam took over much of the day-to-day operation of the ranch, proving himself as capable as his father. Grace married a schoolteacher and moved to Santa Fe, where she became a teacher herself. Robert went to college in the East and became a lawyer, returning to New Mexico to practice. Margaret married a neighboring rancher, and Daniel decided to become a doctor, inspired by the doctor who had delivered him and his siblings. Katherine and Quentin became grandparents many times over, their house often full of visiting children and grandchildren. They took great joy in spoiling the grandkids, and then sending them home to their parents, laughing at the role reversal. As they grew older, they spent more time in rocking chairs on the porch, watching the sunsets and remembering. Katherine's hair turned silver, and lines creased her face, but Quentin still looked at her with the same love he had shown from the beginning. "You're still the most beautiful woman I've ever seen," he would tell her, and she would laugh and call him a foolish old man, but she loved him for it. On their 40th wedding anniversary in 1918, their entire family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. There were children and grandchildren everywhere, and even a few great-grandchildren. Katherine looked around at all of them, at the life she and Quentin had built, and felt overwhelming gratitude. That night, alone in their bedroom, Quentin held her close. 40 years, he marveled. 40 years since you agreed to marry me. Best decision I ever made, Katherine said. Well, second best. The first was choosing freedom when you offered it. I'm glad you chose both, Quentin replied. I can't imagine my life without you in it. You'll never have to, she promised. We're together until the end, you and I. And they were. Quentin died peacefully in his sleep in 1922 at the age of 72, with Katherine holding his hand. She mourned him deeply, but found comfort in their children and grandchildren, in the life they had built together, and in the memories they had made. Katherine lived another 8 years, passing away in 1930 at the age of 75. She died surrounded by family, in the house on the land that she and Quentin had worked so hard to build. Her last words were, "Tell Quinn I'm coming. Tell him to wait for me." They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, their graves marked with a single stone that read, "Quentin and Katherine Fischer, together in life, together in death. Love endures." The ranch continued to thrive under Sam's management and eventually passed to his children and their children. But everyone who lived there or worked there knew the story of how it all began. The story of a woman who was traded like cattle by her kin, and a cowboy who gave her freedom and asked permission. The story of two people who found each other in the worst of circumstances and built something beautiful together. It became a legend of sorts in Lincoln and the surrounding area, told and retold with minor variations, but always maintaining the essential truth. That love can bloom in the darkest places. That freedom is the most precious gift one person can give another. That asking permission rather than taking control is the mark of a truly good man. And that sometimes, just sometimes, the Wild West could produce not just violence and hardship, but also the most enduring and beautiful love stories. The Fischer Ranch stood for generations as a testament to that love, and every person who knew the story understood that it was more than just a story. It was a reminder that no matter how dark things seem, there is always hope. That family is not always defined by blood but by choice and love. That the past does not have to define the future. And that sometimes the best thing you can do for someone is simply to give them the freedom to choose their own path, and then walk that path beside them if they choose you in return. Katherine and Quentin's story lived on, inspiring others to believe in second chances, in redemption, in the power of kindness and respect. It was a legacy more valuable than any amount of land or money, a legacy of love that would endure long after the last person who knew them personally had passed away. And somewhere in whatever comes after this life, two souls walk together through endless fields under endless skies, free and happy and together for all eternity, just as they had promised each other so many years ago on a porch in New Mexico territory, when the world was wild and anything seemed possible.